Add frame button. You do not want to color on the sketch layer, or you will not be able to color the wolf in or make it look good at all. One time I made that mistake 3 times in a row by doing the whole complex outline over the wolf and having to redo the whole thing. So be sure you have a layer above the wolf, or else the whole thing is ruined. Now, usually I start with the top part over here and the ears. So this is sort of how I do my fur. So don't do your fur like that. A triangle doesn't look good. Or don't do it like that, because if you do that shape roundish but super circly, it's not going to look good. And don't do lines unless you're doing detailed lineless art. Lines don't look good. So what I like to do is I like to do small things here with the pen fade in, fade out brush. That is definitely the best brush for drawing. I like sort of making the furs interlocking with each other, making a little bit of curve on one side and make straight lines on the other side. Mix it up, but make sure it flows. You want to use the pen brush for the ears, or else the tips will become thin and it will be hard to color in. Now we're just going to trace over here. Now I'm done with sort of the main parts of the face with fur. I have the snout to do and the neck to do. Now one thing I do is I do not color in the eyes, just in case I need to move them around and I can color under where the eyes should be. It's much easier and more efficient to do the eyes at the end. So I know for most of the project it'll look like an eyeless wolf, but I guess it's worth it if it makes your art look better. And when you draw the eyes, it won't be eyeless anymore. Be sure to use the pen brush for textures that are not fur, or it will be hard to color in. Now when you're drawing fur, try to make no gap like this, because if you do this every time and you try to color it in, then the water or the watercolor will just fill up the entire canvas and not just the wolf, because these are open and you have to spend 20 extra minutes covering up all the gaps in the fur that you draw. So be sure not to do that. Alright, so it's looking okay. And the snout and the ears. Should probably put a little bit more fur there. If you have ever looked at skeleton, you can see there's a bone here, a shoulder bone that sort of attaches here, and so you can outline the just the end of it here to make, because the wolf is putting its weight on this paw and the shoulder bone is going up, and make a little bit of a smaller one over here since the paw does not have any weight on it. Okay, so I'm done with the basic outline. When you're done, turn off the sketch, and if you see any spots that might need some more detail, why don't you go ahead and add them here. So once you have the outline done, let's get into coloring. Before you color, go to the sketch and click the new layer button. You're going to want to have a new layer for coloring, because if you put the color in the outline layer, why don't you name it outline, then the outline will be colored too and it won't look as good. So why don't you name your layers color? It makes it more organized, because sometimes you'll have a lot of layers and you'll have to scroll through every one to see what it is. Oh, and by the way, this button makes the layer disappear, and when you click on it again, it'll reappear. So let's start coloring. Now what color should this be? Let's just do a light gray. Alright, so it looks like it was just that one spot by the ear. So now it looks good, right? But look at this. The points here don't get filled in entirely by the paint bucket. So you're going to have to take some time to fill in all of these spots. Because when you use this for channel art or anything in general, the background you put it on, if you save a transparent version, will show through the fur. So for example, if you put it on a pink background, these spots will be pink and it'll look really weird on a gray wolf. Oh, and one thing, make sure that you're not coloring these legs, because when you're doing shading, you need to have these legs on a separate layer. And also, if you're putting items on your character, do not color in the items on this layer. Color in items and accessories on 1 to 2 separate layers to make shading it easier without shading other things on accident. When I'm done filling in all of these, I'll show you how I shade without getting the paint all over the place. Okay, I think I have about everything. If you notice some missed spots as you're going along, then fill them in. So now I'm going to make a new layer under the main body layer. With Fire Alpaca, if you hover your mouse over the color that you want to color something else and right click, then the color will go straight to that color. So repeat the same process, make sure that there's no transparent bits in whatever you color. Alright, so now you have the lettings here, the main color here, and the outline. I should probably add some color right here as well. Color that in. Okay. Now, so do not, when you're coloring, make sure it's all the same color when you start. This makes it so much easier because there is a way to add the other colors easily in Fire Alpaca without having to color them separately. And make it not look sloppy by putting lines in black lines or any other lines to separate out colors. Make sure it's all one color, the actual wolf. It's okay to color the items different colors, but the wolf should be the same color before you draw it. So what you're going to do is you're going to checkbox the Protect Alpha. And so now when you color, it only stays inside the wolf no matter how much you go outside of the color. The Protect Alpha will make sure that your lines do not go outside of what's already colored. So if if your character has more than one color, you can go there, separate where you want the colors to be. So I think like this area is good. And again, it does not fill in these spots, so you're going to go back to the pen tool and color that all the light gray color that you want, because it stays dark gray since the paintbrush doesn't work very well with that. So it doesn't have to be perfect. Alright, good enough. So let's move on to the back legs. Okay, before you shade, we should color in things such as the ears, the nose, and the mouth. This, you know when you look at pictures of wolves and they don't just have a line for a mouth, they sort of have like gum there. Well, I do it to look more realistic, but you can just have a line if you want. I sometimes do it and I sometimes don't, but I suppose it's okay if you don't. Alright, so let's color in those ears. Don't color in this part. It makes it look better in shading when you color in that part. So it's up to you. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Depends on how much time I have. But you can do this part of the ear on the main body coloring. Checkbox to Protect Alpha. I like using sort of a reddish pink color. Light. Sort of a lightish color because I like using a darker color for the fur and the ear. So let's go on ahead and make a layer for the nose, the mouth, and the ear fur. And do the same thing here. And since it's a mouth and it's sort of wet, you might want to, on the outline layer, use the Fade In, Fade Out brush and do a little white mark there. It's not noticeable, but if people take a close look at your art, it looks pretty cool. Alright, now duplicate the layer that you're going to shade. Now there are two ways to shade. You can use one or the other or both, but sometimes using both will look weird. So one way I shade, the main way I shade, I do it every time, even if I'm doing both. What you're going to do is you're going to go to sort of this bluish purple area and change the color to sort of a dark bluish purple. I don't recommend using a black shading because that does not look good. Using purple makes it look cooler and it just looks better than black shading. Now it may look weird that you're coloring it and it's purple, but don't worry, you can adjust the opacity to make it less. Don't overdo the shading. If you don't like how it's looking and you want an airbrush eraser, change it to this transparent box. This transparent box will smoothly erase the shading parts that you don't want. Alright, usually I shade the the front leg and part of the shoulder, the hip, and down to the leg. Spots where there might be, where the sun isn't hitting a lot. Like maybe under the tuft of fur there, by the ears, behind the ear fur, for sure, behind the snout, this little area, under the snout. So when you're satisfied with what you've done, adjust the opacity to a way that's not too much shading and not too little, but enough where you can see sort of the depth in the artwork. So this looks pretty good. Some of it looks shaky. You can fix that by adding more or erasing some of the opacity. Okay. Now, there is a light source coming from somewhere. So why not go to a white paint and sort of pick a light source where it's coming from. Mine is sort of coming from the left and in the middle. So obviously the left areas of the legs will be hit with some light. If it's too much, then you can adjust not the whole layer, but what your stroke is going to be. So if you want to do an individual stroke or airbrush paint, but you don't want it to be, you want it to be less than this opacity, you can adjust this bar, and this bar adjusts the individual stroke opacity. So I don't like that, so I'm going to delete that. So that should be good enough. So that's the first way of shading, airbrush. Now some people like sort of the more rigid style, so I can just make this transparent so I can show you the next one. So this is a different way. Get the same shade and color, but get the fade in, fade out brush. You can sort of outline the little furs. It takes a really long time for each individual fur. And if you don't want to, then you don't have to. But that's sort of what it looks like. And then you can also do airbrush and make it a little bit more transparent. Now, if you're going to do this, I'd recommend also doing the airbrush technique because it looks not as good with this alone. It's more, you can see a spot where it would be shaded and then just color it in more rigid. It looks better to some people, but personally I like airbrush shading better. But I'll just do a little demonstration. Okay, so I just did 3 little spots. So since the leg is covering up here, there would be a little bit of shadow here, shadow here, shadow there. And if you do it throughout the wolf, it'll look okay, but I'd recommend adding some airbrush as well. I'm not going to keep this because this is just a quick tutorial, or I'm trying to make it quick, but I'll just use this. Alright, so it looks like we should do the back legs now. So since the back legs are further away, duplicate the layer, make it protect alpha, or use a black, or actually I'd recommend purplish, dark purple, and color it in. And adjust the opacity enough so that it looks good enough for being the back legs and not getting hit by the light that you're seeing in the drawing. Alright, so this button merges the layer selected with the layer below it into one layer. So you can merge those, and now they're both one layer. Now you can actually shade it. So use a lot of shading up here where the body is. Make it sort of run down the leg. And just the opacity, just like you did with the body. And if you want, you can add light source. So good enough. Now let's do just the slightest bit on the nose and the ears. So duplicate the layer and add the shading. For the nose, I would recommend black shading color. Now this ear part is covering where the ear over here is, so be sure to add some shading over there. Alright. That looks okay. Now it's time to do the eyes. Okay. So make all of these layers transparent and get back your sketch of the animal you drew. Take the fade in, fade out brush. I like making the tops of the eyes, the line, a little bit bigger for chibi. If you're doing big eyes and sort of more of a complex chibi sort of thing, it may take a few tries to get the shape right. The eye shape is very important because if you have sort of a scribble for the outline of the eye, it will not look good. Alright, and make the thickness of the brush a little bit smaller as you do the bottom of the eye. Okay. Alright. Now, title this layer Eye Outline. Anything you want that will represent that you know it's the eye outline. Now, make a layer below that and make it your eye coloring. Okay. So it depends on what character you're drawing. I'm going to make my character's eyes purplish blue for the pupil. Add a line there. Make sure you're doing the coloring on the same layer. And then the iris should be just a normal blue color. Do it on the other eye. Okay. Now, get rid of the sketch and make a layer under the eye coloring layer and name it eye coloring if you want. It's the same thing because we're going to combine them later. Now color in the iris, the pupil. Now this looks a bit weird, so okay, so now you have the eyes. If you want to see the eyes on your character, you can put all the layers back on. Now, so there are a lot of steps to doing the eyes, but it looks good in the end. So combine the two eye coloring layers. Now you have the color in one and the outline in another. Duplicate the eye coloring layer. And go to a really dark purplish blue once again. And make sure it's Protect Alpha. And sort of make it look right, but sort of outline with the big fade in, fade out pen the top of the eye. Okay, that looks weird. Mess around with it a bit, and when it looks something like this, then you're good. Now, what you should do, you're going to have a lot of eye coloring layers, so I recommend naming them for what it is. So this is sort of the rigid shading. It's a rigid S. I know what S stands for. So duplicate the original one again, make it Protect Alpha, and go back to Airbrush. And use the same color except Airbrush around the same spot. And just the opacity. Now there's a little bit more depth in the eyes. If you want, if you can, or well, this makes the depth look even better. Go to the white brush and in the left corner or wherever the light's facing, use the white brush and make a little circle in here, and that makes it look really detailed. Not super detailed, but still more of a professional way. Okay, so the next thing you're going to do is make a new layer, title it Gleam. You should make moderate size dot here, make it a little bit oval, do the same here, except maybe a little thinner since it's from the angle where I made this wolf at. Then make a smaller dot right under there, and now you have good looking eye. Now I'd recommend if you're going to have an eye like this, you might want to do more shading and detail than I did on this tutorial wolf. But okay, so now let's get into glow or luminosity, some people call it. First, what you're going to do is you're going to combine all of your eye layers, but what you need to find the original layer that you started with, take the one above it, then merge it, then take the one above it, then merge it again, because if you merge two duplicates of it, then it will not look good. Merge the gleam into the eye, Don't merge the eye outline with the eye coloring. Make the outlines separate, both body and eye, on top. Combine all of the shading layers. So now we have them all in one. Combine the back legs. You can delete the sketch version if you want to make it more organized. So now you're down to a few layers, and now the luminosity is pretty simple, but setting it up is a bit tricky. So duplicate the layer that you're going to add luminosity to, and go to Blending, click on the drop-down bar, and go to Add. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to erase the whole thing on the duplicate layer, check it off with Protect Alpha, and make it go to Clipping. Now, it depends on what type of what color glow you want. Some colors don't mix well. The silver works well on this gray color, but my favorite gold color is gold because gold works well. See, that looks really good. But black and white do not usually work well on colors that are not tones. So I like using gold. This is a really good color. So just color in the areas that the light source is coming from with this special pen, so to get rid of the spots that you don't like. If you have multiple light sources or just want a glowy character, then you can do multiple different colors and things from different angles. So once you have a decent amount of glow, well, this doesn't look realistic. So it depends on how chibi or glowy you want your character to be, but adjust the opacity to make a reasonable amount. This is enough for me. I don't need a super glowy character. Alright, so do the same process with the back leg and what other layers you have. Okay, so with the eye, if you want to make it more chibi-ish or cute, add some luminosity in the same area that you added the white light. Now, it's a little bit glowy and it looks pretty cool. So there's one more step that you have to do for the actual coloring. So what you're going to do is you're going to combine the luminosity layers into the layer that you duplicated. Then combine all of the layers except the two outlines. Keep those. And then duplicate the entire thing. And make it add. If you have the patience and if you think this looks good from my art and some other people's art, then give it a try. Go to add, do the same whole process, and what you're going to do is you're taking in mind the light source, you're going to add a little luminosity outline to some of the bigger fur strands to resemble that the light is hitting them. Now this just isn't for effect. In real life, this sort of lighting will happen. Maybe do the eyes a bit for if you want it to be more glowy. Okay, so you can adjust the opacity of this, but it doesn't need to be adjusted a lot. Usually it looks okay from a distance. It's not really that much of a distracting thing. Makes it look better. Just finish up the last outlines, and then get ready for one of or the last steps in the process of making animal art. Alright, so if you want to use this for stuff, it's really cool to have a detailed shadow, not just a drop shadow that you can add in programs, to have an actual shadow. So combine every single layer once you are completely satisfied. Now, you might want to save a copy of the file that does not have all of the layers combined, just in case you want to edit some of the parts. So when you're done saving it and doing all that stuff, duplicate the layer, put it on Protect Alpha, go to a black brush, go to pen, and color the whole thing black. Alright, make sure there's no parts that are not black. Now, adjust the opacity. Click Command T. That will give you the ability to edit the length and how big it is, and it's really useful. So since shadows sort of stretch and do all that stuff, you might want to shorten the shadow, bring it down to where the feet are, make sure that the feet line up, and then click Command T again. Now you can adjust the opacity of the shadow however you like, then drag this layer down below the main layer. Go to the blur pen. The blur pen is really useful for blurring shading and luminosity and everything. And just blur. You can do it a lot or a little. I like doing just a little. But make sure that because shadows are blurred a bit. But what's important is that you have the shadow on a separate layer, so you can save a version without the shadow. Okay, so that's good enough. Now, what you're going to do, since it's over, is save a file with the shadow, then get rid of the shadow and save another file. If you want to do a background, you can save a file with a background, but if you're going to add a white background, please, it doesn't look good. Just save a transparent version and it'll upload much better. Having a white background it looks unprofessional when you can save a transparent version and put it on a different background. Okay, so I hope that helped you and gave you some tips on drawing on the computer and maybe sketching it on paper. So a lot of people have been asking what screen recorder and editor I use. I use QuickTime Player. Sometimes I'm using QuickTime Player for this because I don't have my other screen recorder, but most of the time I use Snagit. QuickTime is free, but Snagit costs like $40 or something, but it's easy because there's a little blue icon that will appear on the side of the computer, and you can hover your mouse above it, and you can click the record button whenever you want if you want to record something quickly, like a trade or something, and you can pause the video whenever you want if there's something going on that you don't want the people watching the video to see or anything. It's really easy, and it's pretty much worth the money if you're serious about recording. I use Camtasia too to edit my videos. It's $100, but there's a month free trial, and you can have a month of videos with the Awesome Recorder, and if you have enough money to buy it, then you will be really successful in your YouTube channel if you learn how to use it. And it's pretty easy to use. So thanks for watching. I hope this helped. I'll be answering as many questions as I can in the comments. And remember to like, comment, and subscribe.